Hey, Dutch Uncle George here, and on this video I want to discuss some thoughts I've had since the CharlieKirk killing, and not so much the killing itself, but the response to it by the political extremes. You know, on and really what I've been thinking in terms of things that need to change. But let's start with, I was really disgusted and disappointed to see a lot of liberals basically celebrating this death. And like I understand that he was a controversial figure. He said some things that people found highly offensive, and even created, overt hatred. But I think we need to take a step back on actually celebrating the death of our enemies. If somebody's actually physically injuring people, okay, maybe there's some room for that. But this is a guy who he talked, he said some shit, and if you can't muster any sympathy for him personally, maybe think about his kids. He had two young kids who were actually there at the event. I think one of them's 1 year old and the other one's 3. They're going to be without their father, and I don't think they're old enough to have political opinions one way or the other. So maybe think about them. Like I said, really disappointing to see that. Now, on the other side, we've got people in the really far right who are seeing this as a call to arms and, calling for civil war. And again, disappointing, very disappointing to see that somebody would take this tragic event to push more violence. The guy who committed the shooting, regardless of what it turns out his political leanings were, regardless of what his motivations were, he was an individual acting alone. He was a mentally disturbed person, obviously. Highly unfortunate for everybody involved. I feel bad for his family and his friends. How do you reconcile this person that you knew was a promising young person, and he went and did this horrible act? Really tough to be in their shoes, I'm sure, especially with the press circus that has come out of it, and I'm sure that they're getting probably death threats and that sort of thing. It's just a horrible thing all around. And so my thoughts on this initially were: is this what we've come to? When we disagree with somebody, that we either actually go out and kill them if we're lacking in any kind of self-control whatsoever, or mentally disturbed and are willing to take a life to, I guess, make ourselves feel better somehow. I don't know. But to actually celebrate a violent death like that, or to use it as a way of promoting, something that's been simmering for a while, this idea of civil war. Not sure how these Civil War proponents would expect this to take place, because it's not like the Civil War that we had in the 1800s, where things were kind of geographically separated. Now we're all living and working in close proximity to each other. So unless you're talking about killing your neighbors and coworkers, which thankfully is still illegal, I don't think you're going to see a civil war. And if you did, it ain't going to be pretty, it ain't going to be fun, and you are not going to get what you think you're going to get out of it. But going back to the CharlieKirk thing, the governor of Utah has placed a lot of blame for this on social media, and I happen to agree with him on that. It's when the internet first started, I was in my mid to late 20s, when it became available to the general public, not being a military operation that started in the 80s. But we had dial-up internet initially, which was extremely slow. I mean, now we can post horrible videos online. I'm not sure that's a great thing, but back then, posting a video was basically not going to happen. Even posting just a an image, a picture, would take a long time, hours. But when the internet first came out, there was a lot of potential there, I think, that people were excited about. It was a way to keep in touch with your friends and loved ones a little bit more easily and inexpensively. It was a way of sharing ideas with people all over the world, people of all different, races and nationalities and religions. And, there was this great positivity surrounding the internet at that time. And then as time went on, internet got faster, and more and more people began to use it, and basically became almost universally used. I know not 100% of people out there use the internet, but quite a high percentage do. I don't know what it is. But as it became more and more popular, the companies that ran the internet and subsequently social media, I think, started to see the dollar signs in manipulating how it was used. And we went from this positivity and sharing and interacting with people different from us to the algorithms narrowing down our focus to those things we've shown an interest in. So, we started out wide interests, and we got, exposure to more people. And I think it led to more acceptance between people and more tolerance of different beliefs and different views and different ways of living. But as those algorithms started creeping in, those focuses started to get narrower and narrower. It would just start feeding you those things that you'd interacted with. And as that became more and more of a thing, they started seeing more and more profits because they could target ads. Ads would get better response. Advertisers were willing to spend more money on ads. And so it became a bigger and bigger thing where they were creating algorithms that were really, really targeting your beliefs, really, really targeting those things that you thought were important. And it put people who had more extreme ideas into a bit of an echo chamber. Whereas if you had an extreme idea before, you express that idea, and while some people would support it, a lot of people would shout you down and say you're an idiot. Now, with those algorithms, you go on social media and you could put out the most extreme idea. You might say, this person needs to die. And because the algorithm and the way it's set up, most of your feedback is going to be in support of that idea. And this is, I think, becoming a bigger and bigger problem now with AI being able to generate images and videos that look very realistic. It's getting to be pretty scary what you can put out there and have people believe and have people support. Now, I don't expect any of that to go away. If anything, I think AI is going to get better, more realistic, more believable. Social media is going to, focus those algorithms even more. And it's going to create more and more hatred, more and more anger, more and more fear of them. And not even being real specific about who they are. It's just whoever's different or has any belief that even remotely is different from yours, then it creates more and more animosity, more and more hatred, and ultimately, in those people who are prone to it, more and more violence. And that's a very sad thing to me. And unfortunately, like I said, I don't think that's going anywhere. I don't think social media is going to go away. But there are some things that each of us can do to maybe start shifting the focus a little bit. My suggestion, if you're caught up in social media and you have a very well defined sense of politics or sense of what's right and wrong in terms of race or gender or marriage or social issues, any of that stuff, and you never hear a well thought out or logical or unemotional response to that, maybe it's time we started seeking that out. Instead of just following and liking those things that we actually like and are actually interested in, maybe start, looking at some of these other things and getting them into your algorithm by means of interacting with them. So following, liking, even commenting negatively on them is still interaction with it. And it'll still tend to drive those algorithms to send you information that you might not have considered before. And the more of us who do this, and in fact, not just like and subscribe and follow people that we may not agree with 100%, maybe like and subscribe to people we actually hate, that we actually, just violently oppose their position. Because just getting that contrasting point of view can allow us to, think about what our actual beliefs are on that subject. It also, if, you don't think that's a benefit, well, then you're at least learning what you're up against in terms of the opposition. But I think if you go into it with an open mind, to actually listen to what they have to say, no matter how much it pisses you off, no matter how much it might disgust you, at least you can learn where they're coming from, what their objections are to your point of view, what they're afraid of. And if we start looking at some of these opposing points of view, maybe we can get back to a point where we start to, if not cooperate, at least not actively, try to harm each other for having an opposing point of view. We've got a lot of challenges to face in this world. And as a country and as a global economy and a global community, we have a lot of challenges. And these challenges are not going to get solved by retreating to a rather limited, narrow political point of view. We got to cooperate to get some of this stuff done, to get things to actually improve. And until we start kind of getting to know each other again and actually actively listening and considering what the other side has to say, I'm afraid that all that's going to happen is this is going to further degenerate into more and more hatred, more and more fear, more and more anger, and more violence. So, hope you'll at least consider that, suggestion, maybe a hope on my part that you'll at least, maybe on social media start interacting with stuff you wouldn't ordinarily interact with, and just kind of get a different point of view on things. Like I said, I hope you'll consider it. And if you've watched this far and didn't, throw your computer across the room because you didn't like what I had to say and are now currently plotting my demise, well, thank you for watching. And hopefully next video will be something a little bit more interesting, or not interesting, but a little bit more positive, a little bit more upbeat. And we'll go from there. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you got something out of this. Bye.